you guys for making it today during the holidays. So happy to see you. I think we did a beta launch on the bonding yesterday. And the purpose, we do this during the holiday, just, gives the community a taste of how the bonding process works, and also an opportunity to get ALD at deep discount and to the most committed community members during the holidays. So we plan to do a full launch on the new token economics with bonding and staking in January. So with this new token economics, and the Boule Council will be empowered to implement any crypto investment strategy, from yield farming to token pre-sale, dynamically keeping up with the ever-changing crypto market conditions. And the ALD token is going to be the crypto native asset representing Aladdin DAO's portfolio of assets. And the ownership of ALD just gives everyone in the community exposure to these premium crypto assets handpicked by the Boule Council, and making Aladdin DAO the community-owned Berkshire Hathaway. So that's on the new token economics. And secondly, so just want to make sure people are aware that we sent the first batch of bonus for Boule members before the Christmas holiday. And we will send the second batch after this meeting and the voting process. So you should be able to see your XALD by connecting your wallet to the staking page at the website already. And the third thing I want to cover is we have posted the Boule members with a new Boule incentive structure before the Christmas. And we do need feedback on this. And because this is the game that's going to be played by you guys, so it'll be great if you let us know what you think and help us to improve. And if we come to agreement on this, we would actually do a big voting session on all the strategies proposed so far. And the Boule members will be rewarded with 100K ALD immediately if their proposed strategies get voted in. And we'll come out with announcement on how this process will work soon. And I think lastly, as part of the new Boule incentive structure, the community will, I think from this week, the community will elect 3 Boule members who they think contribute most to Aladdin DAO community building process. And each of the 3 Boule members will get 50K XALD, and the payout will happen with the other Boule incentives every second week. So we will launch a snapshot proposal on this later today. And we do need help from Boule members on the community building process, as well as asset selections. And yeah, so that's basically what I want to cover quickly on the community side. And now I will pass on to Saneel, who will present 88 MPH today.
Awesome, thanks, Sharlyn. Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. You can see this?
Yes.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. I know it's pretty late into the holidays. If you are tuning in now or later, I appreciate it. Today I think I wanted to talk about 88 MPH, which is a fixed rate lending protocol. And we'll get into why I think 88 MPH is especially interesting, both individually and within the context of what we do at Aladdin DAO. But first, I think it's useful to talk about on-chain lending and rates. So, just as a quick recap, lending on-chain is a very, very core critical component of DeFi. Enables leverage, shorting, composability, and more. And most of all, people kind of view the ability to lend on protocols like Compound and Aave and get some sort of rate in return as kind of a bellwether, investment product rate to beat when comparing DeFi yields. Just given how, old they are and how kind of well vetted they are in terms of security, in terms of having deep liquidity, et cetera, et cetera. Most of these lending protocols, so Compound and Aave are probably going to be the ones that you've heard of the most. But there are others like, Harvest and Unit, et cetera, use automated interest rate models to model the interest rates that you see when you are depositing liquidity or borrowing against your deposits. And so usually this will come in the form of like interest rate curves that are kind of determined by an initial team and then parameterized by governance, but it'll usually look like something like, okay, if there's, the lower the amount of assets borrowed relative against a certain asset, against the total amount of a certain asset deposited, the lower the interest rates. But there's this question that's kind of uh, avoided, these protocols, or been very hard to implement, which is, if I'm someone who is providing liquidity to a lending protocol, or if I want to get yield on my assets, how do I actually lock in like a fixed rate for an extended period of time, right? So as an example, let's say, Alice wants to ensure that she can get, 7% fixed on her 100 die over 6 months. So at the end of 6 months, she will for sure have 107 die. Well, if Alice were to put this in like compounded Aave as is, she can't really guarantee this. Rates might be at 7% for 2 months, so she might, everything might be going well, but then maybe, Bob will come into the die pool with 10 million worth of die, which just adds a ton of liquidity. And since there's suddenly all this, this die that's able to be borrowed but isn't being borrowed, the rates are lower, right? So there's, lower demand for borrowing against die versus, providing die. And suddenly, Alice isn't getting her 7% rate, so she can't really hit her target, right? Um, this is kind of like the current state. There are some kind of, inbuilt workarounds where, for example, Aave has something called a stable rate, which is a rate that kind of changes at a lower frequency to the variable rate, but it's not exactly, a fixed rate for a certain duration. And this is an example of what that borrow interest rate curve might look like. In this case, is for the DAI market on Aave, and you can kind of see how the APY, in terms of what you're getting, changes depending on the usage ratio. And again, that usage ratio is the ratio of, how many assets, how much is being borrowed against the total amount of assets for a single asset in dollars. So this whole thing of, how do you create this like on-chain fixed rate lending, or how do you even get people to get a fixed rate on their deposits in kind of like a credit back system, has had quite a history. People have been working on kind of like fixed rate lending and fixed rate models almost as long as they've actually been working on, money markets and lending protocols themselves. So there was a lot of kind of early designs, especially in DeFi summer and right before DeFi summer, such as Row, that focus around interest rate swaps, where, instead of like trying to build a fixed rate lending protocol from the ground up, you would go and look at external protocol like Compound or Aave. You would get someone that would be willing to pay the variable rate for that protocol was offering, and someone who'd be willing to pay a fixed rate and basically have them swap cash flows. This is cool, but it never really got traction. I think it was just very hard for users to do. Hard to do this in kind of an automated faction in an automated way, just because, we kind of have to wait for people willing to, engage in these contracts on both sides, and doing this kind of in an automated fashion, rather than having the protocol be the counterparty, had its risks. Then a lot of protocols had this idea of kind of using zero coupon bond like mechanisms. And what a zero coupon bond is, that it's not exactly a bond in the traditional sense, in that, you have principal and then you have interest that you accrue and you're able to redeem those at the end. Rather that, there's some notion of principal, but all that principal is unlocked at the end of the bond, and the bond is actually expected to trade at a discount to market price, or to the, locked amount on the market. So, in the case of yield protocol / notional finance, which basically uses this kind of model, you would lock up some principal. So let's say that, you're going to lock up one ETH, and that gets locked up for a duration of, however long. Let's say it's 12 months. You'll get a tokenized claim to the full amount of that at the end of the duration. So you get a tokenized claim that basically says, hey, you can go claim one ETH in 12 months. And you expect that tokenized claim to be able to trade at a discount based on time. And the way this enables fixed rate lending is, a borrower can sell claim for a discount and the lender can buy the claim. So if I have this claim to one ETH in 12 months, I can sell it for like less than an ETH right now. And maybe I'll sell it for like 0.5 ETH and someone else will buy it. So I just borrowed, quote unquote, 0.5 ETH, and the person who bought it just lent, quote unquote, 0.5 ETH. And the rate I'm paying, the rate they're getting, is the difference between 1 ETH and 0.5 ETH, amortized over the 12-month period. And Dan Robinson even created an AMM to help price assets like this. Notional and yield pretty much work the same way. The only difference is that notional, through a slight change in its model, allows the principal use, so the actual asset that you're locking up and providing for redemption, and the asset being lent and borrowed, so the asset you're actually paying the fixed rate on, to be different. But it has its own capital efficiency trade-offs in terms of requiring over collateralization. So that's one model. Barnbridge said, okay, let's avoid all that, complexity with that, and let's just trench it, right? Let's just go look at an underlying lending protocol like Compound and Aave and create, one tranche where people are guaranteed a fixed rate and one tranche where people, handle the volatility. So, if the yield generated by depositing assets is over the fixed rate, then cool. The people in this volatile tranche keep all that excess reward. But if it's under, then they have to cover for the people in the fixed rate tranche. And then element finance kind of merges both of the ideas in that it looks at any kind of yield bearing assets, but primarily assets like Compound and Aave, and it separates the yield bearing assets into what are called principal and yield tokens. The principal tokens kind of work just like the zero coupon bond mechanism, like we just talked about with yield or notional. So your principal, you set a duration, and your principal is pretty much locked for that duration, and trades at a discount, which allows you to fix rates. So let's say that, I deposit CUSDC, so compound USDC for a year, then and we'll say that's 100 worth of CUSDC. And that my principal on that is 100 because it was freshly minted 100 underlying USDC. Then my principal token basically is a claim to that 100 USDC within a year and can trade at a discount. And then the other part of it is the yield token, which is basically a claim to whatever yield is generated by that 100 USDC in compound. So all these protocols are, they have merit, and I wanted to spend time discussing the 488 MPH for people to get an understanding of how other fixed yield protocols have worked. It's a lot of smart people that have spent time carefully figuring out mechanisms and pricing to make them work. There's still some level of complexity and inconvenience for the end user that I think makes 88 MPH more convenient and better in a lot of cases. So in the case of the notional yield and element model of having this kind of fixed rate that's guaranteed through the sale of something like a zero coupon bond where you redeem the full amount later, so it trades at a market discount. The lock principal is still liable to having the fixed rates determined by the actual market price at which it's bought and sold, right? So this is actually determined by more complicated market factors like, okay, what are the rates I can get on other protocols, and what is the liquidity pool for each asset? Because remember that when I create liquidity for something like being able to redeem 100 DAI 12 months from now, that's going to have a different liquidity pool than being able to redeem 100 DAI 6 months from now, right? And then the other part is that Barnbridge sidesteps this kind of level of complexity, but because of the tranching system, you really rely on the protocol and governance to really set, okay, what assets are we offering tranches, what kind of underlying markets, how long is the tranche thing going to last? So you really don't have the flexibility of opening up kind of this individual position that you would get on notional yield or element. So this is where 88 MPH comes in, and for those Back to the Future fans, 88 MPH is a referral to speed Marty uses to get to the future. But what is 88 MPH? So, as we kind of alluded to, it is a fixed rate protocol offering depositors two things. But the first is a fixed rate product for any duration between 1 and 365 days relative to underlying lending protocols. So there's Compound Aave. I believe they also have Harvest is a yield protocol, and they have a few others, I believe, that you can go find on their website. But essentially, users can deposit listed assets. So they have markets ranging as far as classic ETH, WBTC, USDC, DAI, to BAT, Comp, Uni, etc. Pretty much any market that exists on the underlying protocols are integrated with, to get a fixed yield rate on that asset that's paid at the end of the duration. This fixed rate that they are quoted is dependent on two factors. First, the 88 MPH protocol takes 30-day exponential moving average of the underlying lending protocol's interest rate for that asset, and then and the duration of the actual fixed rate deposit. And depending on the duration, it offers between 37.5% and 75% of the quoted EMA for the underlying. So as an example, let's say that Compound's USDC market, if you deposit into it, has been quoting at a 30-day EMA of 10%. Then a 12-month 100 USDC deposit on 88 MPH for USDC, which Compound USDC is the underlying market, will earn you 3.7 USDC, which is basically 10%, 37.5% of 10%. Uh, the shorter the deposit, they have higher offered rates. So in this case, because the 12-month 100 USD deposit was the longest period possible, it's offered the lowest percentage cut of that. But let's say that it was instead, for example, a 1 day deposit, right? Then you would get 77.5% APR for a single day on this 100 USDC deposit. And this is kind of what the interface looks like. So again, you can go check this out at 88mph.app, but it'll actually quote you the fixed APR that you'll get and how much yield it results on your collateral. You'll notice that the fixed rate yield at maturity isn't exactly the deposit amount times the fixed APR. And that's actually because it's net of 20% fees, which goes to the protocol. And we'll get into the other rewards quoted here with MPH APR later. So this is where 88 MPH, really shines in that, unlike the similar fixed yield protocols like, Element notional yield, where you have some sort of principal that you lock up and you get a fixed rate on, you actually can withdraw your position at any time. You can also add additional liquidity to your deposit at any time to lock in the same rate that your existing deposit has. So if you already have 100 USDC earning 3.75% over 12 months, I can add another 500 USDC earning that same rate, as long as it's any time before the end of that 12-month period. It'll continue to earn that fixed rate until the expiration of that. Similarly, if I have 100 USDC that is earning 3.75% over a 12-month period, and I decide that I don't want that fixed rate anymore, I can actually choose to withdraw my entire position or part of my position. And the amount that I withdraw, isn't immediately just withdrawn and that's it. It's actually just put back into the underlying lending protocol, so it still remains a yield bearing asset. The only thing is that you forfeit the privilege of having a locked in fixed rate, so you're still going by the variable rate of, say, Compound or Aave, and you also pay a small withdrawal fee for withdrawing early. So this lets 88 MPH kind of merge the best of both worlds. You have the utility that comes with being able to use another protocol's liquidity in lending markets like bar and bridge, but you're able to provide more individualized positions like yield element and notional, by letting people kind of open their own positions. But at this point, this all may seem a little bit too good to be true, right? And kind of the biggest question that arises is that, what if the underlying lending protocol's yield actually goes far below the promised fixed rate, right? So what if I'm promised 3.75% over 12 months, but suddenly Compound's, underlying rate goes from like 7% or 10% to 1%? Who's going to cover that money? Oh, I believe it got cut off, but that's all right. Well, so in this case, 88 MPH actually uses quite an innovative mechanism called yield tokens, and these are distinctly different from the yield tokens that are found in Element Finance. So this interface kind of shows what it looks like, but essentially yield tokens are created with each new deposit, and these yield tokens are kind of auctioned off to buyers, and they're priced at essentially the expected total rate payments for the fixed rate for that deposit. So for example, if I have a 100 DAI deposit with 3.75% rate, I need to get paid 103.75 DAI at the end of my deposit period, which means that the yield tokens auctioned off are priced at 3.7 DAI for the entire position. So let's say that Alice, has this 100 DAI deposit over the 12-month period with 3.75%. Then there's yield tokens minted priced at 3.7 DAI. Someone else, we'll say Bob, will come and buy those yield tokens at 3.75 DAI. That 3.75 DAI is then what's used to pay Alice's fixed rate at the end of her deposit period. So what does Bob get in return? The yield tokens that Bob paid for with the 3.7 DAI and entitle him to all the yield generated by Alice's principal on the underlying lending protocol. So 3.75 DAI that Bob pays guarantees Alex's fixed rate. But in return, Bob gets all the yield generated on Alice's 100 DAI deposit in compound. So let's say that compound averages about 7% for the 12-month period. Bob will actually get 7 DAI in return for his 3.7 DAI, which is 100% return. But obviously, Bob takes on the volatility. So if it turns out that the rate is below that 3.75%, let's say that on average it's about 2% for that entire 12-month period, then Bob only gets 2 DAI on that. So he gets the optionality of having much more leverage in terms of paying very little for having the yield on a much larger deposit, but he also takes on the volatility and downside risk of rates falling below the fixed rate that Bob pays for. And this is what it looks like. So you can actually see, for example, with the Ran on Aave, there's yield tokens listed where you pay a certain fixed principal, and it tells you the amount of yield tokens available and the price that you pay for it, and how much of the actual principal you're earning for the underlying market, and what your expected return on investment is through an internal article that 88MPH runs to kind of offer this data to people who are looking to buy yield tokens. So a few other things. 88MPH is actually cross-chain. It's live on Ethereum, Avalanche, Polygon, and Phantom, with Ethereum and Phantom being kind of the most active chains. Has almost $60 million TVL across all these chains, and users have earned almost 1.5 million in interest so far. The MPH token is inflationary, which we'll get into a second, and it's trading around $30, and only 27% of that token is staked. So you can stake MPH token has quite a few functionalities, but the main one is you can stake MPH to actually get claims to protocol revenue, which comes in 3 different sources. So when deposits, are open and the fixed rate is paid at the end of the deposit. So in our case, when we finally get that 3.75 DAI on our 100 DAI deposit, 20% of that is actually claimed for the protocol. And then 0.5% of principal on early withdrawals. So let's say that I had a 100 DAI position open for 12 months and I decide to withdraw that, then 0.5% of that is taken as a fee for early withdrawal, and that's also sent to the protocol revenue. And any tokens that are earned from underlying liquidity incentives for deposits, so let's say you're earning comp or Aave through deposits via MPH, then those are actually sent to a dumper contract at MPH, which then sells those tokens every two weeks to buy back MPH on the market. MPH also gives voting rights and governance, like any other governance token. And you can actually trade MPH on the MPH ETH pool on SushiSwap. This is the main pool. And you can LPA MPH ETH for about 16% APR at current Sushi and MPH emissions. But how do you actually earn MPH tokens aside from just buying and liquidity provisioning? The MPH supply is actually inflationary. So MPH tokens are newly minted for each deposit according to this formula, which is the deposit amount times the deposit period times the issuance multiplier. So the longer deposits plus the longer amounts will equate to more MPH tokens earned over that period. And the issuance multiplier is set by each asset by the governance multisig. You also earn MPH tokens for buying yield tokens and covering the volatility of the protocol, which is simply equal to the interest earned, which is the interest earned on the underlying principal in the underlying lending protocol times the issuance multiplier, with the multiplier again being set by governance. Off this newly minted MPH, 10% is sent to a developer fund and 10% is sent to a treasury. And the idea is that even though MPH is permanently inflationary and there's no hard cap on how much MPH can exist, this is offset by the increased TVL, since all MPH is only minted through the ability of creating deposits and creating positions and buying yield tokens. So these are just some token stats that I won't get into, but they're kind of there for anyone who's interested in how MPH is performing as of today. And yeah, happy to answer any questions from those on the call. That's kind of the end of the presentation.
Hey, Saneel, thanks for the presentation. That was really interesting. My first question is, do you actually know the team and who's behind it? I'm just curious about who the humans are.
Yeah. So AMPH team is kind of composed of, I think, some mix of pseudo anons. But I think the team is mainly just a bunch of very prominent hackers on Twitter. So one that people might be most familiar with is Zeph. He helped Owen from ZeroXMons build SudoSwap, right, which is the OTC, is also part of Metacartel and Raid Guild. And he's been building 88 MPH app, and he's also joined by two Anons, McFly, which is his Twitter name, and I think it's pronounced Seth. It's SZETH. And these two Anons are also just builders, but Zeph is kind of the main face behind 88 MPH. He's a very, very well known and well respected Solidity engineer, and he's not Anon. His name is available for everyone.
Cool, thanks. I'm also curious. I'd heard about 88 MPH, never actually checked them out, but I've used like Element, and I don't know if you've heard of this thing called Ondo, which is kind of similar, where they split fixed and variable. And so just curious, why is 88 MPH like better from the user perspective versus these other platforms? I think you touched on this a little bit, but I'm just curious, like what are some of like the nuances?
Yeah, I think that I broadly break down the fixed rate landscape as it is into kind of this, okay, let's go take this principal yield separation and let's go take this principal, lock it up for a certain period, and then, if you want, go sell it on the market, right? And the person selling it sells it at a discount to the actual principal because of the, it being time locked, right? And you not being able to use it. And that's kind of how you lock in a fixed rate, right? You sell this locked up principal at a discount. Whatever you sell it at is, what you get, and essentially you're borrowing quote unquote capital, and you borrow it at a fixed rate, which is basically the difference between, the principal and what you sold it at amortized, and someone lends it to you, right? And that's the person buying it. So that's kind of the Element model, right? And that model is actually, it's pretty cool. I think it has a lot of its own merits, and people have actually figured out pretty decent pricing for how to do this, and take into account the time value of these deposits. The problem, I think, primarily what happens with Element and Notional, that MPH kind of fixes is that they're able to offer this fixed rate through the market sale of this lock principal. So when people are going and buying rates, they're actually still, even though they are locking fixed rate over the duration of their deposit, they're still kind of liable to market forces at work, and these market forces can become really complicated, right? So it can depend on the liquidity pools that you're selling into and how they price it, who else is buying, how much is minted, what are rates on other protocols. And I think this creates a layer of complexity where, sometimes you just have users waiting to be able to buy or sell these like principal tokens and lock in rates, but they have to wait a really long time, right? There's no really good benchmarks because kind of these rates don't exist in a void per se, but a lot of them are set independently because they exist endemically within the protocol, right? So there's a level of uncertainty there. And then in the case of Ondo or Barn Bridge, where you have kind of a tranching system, you separate out the volatility in the fixed rate into two different, tranches. But what this also means is that you're kind of liable to the vaults that people give, right? And so these vaults, you're very dependent on these vaults, being available in the assets you want, right? Waiting for the governments of, Barn Bridge or Ondo to set the vaults, right? To set the parameters for the vaults, the different tranches. And it basically takes away a lot of the individuality in opening positions that you would get with a yield or Element or a notional. So where I think 88 MPH really shines is that it kind of combines the best of both of those, right? You have the flexibility of opening your own position, your own duration, anywhere between a day and a year on any asset covered by any of their underlying protocols, which at this point, I think the asset list is quite extensive, almost like 20, 30 assets. But, you don't have to worry about kind of the additional market complexity that comes with, having to sell that principal token, and that, your fixed rate is directly tied to, the underlying, compound or Aave or whatever lending protocol, all of which, the rates are well known, the EMA of those rates are well known. So you get the additional, predictability that you get with the Barn Bridge or an Ondo, but you also get the individual deposit and flexibility that you get with no show yield or Element. So being able to do both of those in a way that actually makes sense and covers a lot of the volatility risk involved with the rates so that the protocol doesn't go insolvent, as I think where 88 MPH does a much better job than any other protocol.
Saneel, hey, great presentation and just like really comprehensive overview of all of this, like much deeper than I had understood about a lot of these protocols. One other thing I'd add is I think one of the things that always impressed me about 88 MPH is, and I think you touched on it, is the fees. You know, just like there is a token with a claim on fees, and right now I'm involved in Barnbridge. We don't have any fees there yet. There's Element, which obviously doesn't. Element, I think you also touched on. It is a I it's just not comparable, like how easy it is to withdraw from a position
Yep.
with 88 MPH versus Element. Like it's just there's no like you said, it's very complex, and I would argue in most cases you probably wouldn't have the liquidity to withdraw your position, you know, and be able to get enough back of it that it would make it worth it. And then there's Notional, which is doing great work as well, but they don't have, as far as I know, they're charging like really minimal fees.
Yep.
Correct me if you know anything different, but anyways, my takeaway here is 88 MPH has a non or pseudo anonymous core team members, and they've got a well-established token. So, you know, if someone was saying, hey, all I want to do here is earn fixed yield, that's one thing. But if we're to earn the you know, the, in this case, the native governance token, the token that has a claim on fees, yeah, you've called it out. 88 MPH is the one opportunity, and I'm hoping that the other protocols adopt a model like what they have. But I think it's really important to note that like they have that asymmetric advantage right now as a team that can do more bold things with their token, just because of the fact that I think that their you know, their identities aren't out there. But
Yeah.
anyways, man, thanks so much. This is really this is one of the best presentations.
I know. I think those are like really, really good points. I'm glad you brought up the withdrawal point, because even if it is small, relative to the fees they take on deposits, having the additional revenue from being able to basically charge people if they want to early withdraw, right, is actually something that like pretty much like none of these other protocols can do, right? Because 88 MPH is the only one that, you know, offers these like individual deposits, but also lets you withdraw from them, right? And I think that's actually like, you know, pretty just ingenious on the team's part. And I think it shows like a very nice level of insight and foresight into how should this like protocol actually be built, right? So yeah,
Hey,
good points there.
Sunil,
Thank you.
I have one follow up there. As I was like looking at the yields, so a while ago I looked at 88 MPH, and
Yep.
the yields had dropped a lot. And I mean, we're talking like everything was like single digits, like below 5%, and it was part of the reason I didn't deposit. I just checked, you know, of course, while you were presenting, and I noticed there's some like much much higher yields now. Do you
Yeah.
know why that is? Is that like just new pools, or the new a new like version that's been released?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say without knowing kind of when you had checked, but it's very possible that it also might be just because they have, for one, they have a lot of assets that, you know, they previously didn't because they integrated with B protocol and Harvest. Two, I think
That's it.
DeFi has seen sort of a resurgence lately, so the actual dollar value of MPH tokens has probably gone up, maybe in the past week, which probably also, you know, affects the yield that you're going to see on your deposits. But yeah, I suspect that those are the two reasons, because I think the core model hasn't changed. V3 was also announced with a few tweaks on September 7th. So if you checked in the summer, it might have been very different.
No. That's probably it. You know, it might be just, I know all of the major DeFi tokens had been pulverized for, for
Yeah,
like 12 months. So yeah. But yeah, no, the yields are much higher now. So anyways, good.
yeah,
Just thanks so much. This is a killer opportunity.
yeah. I think there's some pretty good yield opportunities if this is something that we can get out to the Aladdin DAO community. But yeah.
Also, I do want to call out, this is one of those projects that I envisioned Aladdin DAO, now even with the tokenomics having changed and like our mission pivoting some, I thought this was part of the reason, that we were all excited about the project. There are protocols out there that are doing, I think, really important fundamental work to make DeFi easy and accessible and checking off the boxes of really obvious use cases. But sometimes those like really important fundamental projects aren't as popular because there's dog tokens and we now everybody's eyes shift to the metaverse and flipping JPEGs and so on. So I think this is for me this is a prime example of it's a battle tested protocol. It's a protocol that knock on wood, I'm not as worried about like any sort of a unforeseen rug pull. They've got audit after audit, and again, like standing the test of time is really the thing that helps all of us to sleep at night, despite the audits. So, for what it's worth, I'm hoping we can find more of these protocols that they've existed. They have strong communities, but this protocol only has at the moment. I was looking. I thought it was like what is it? 59, 60 million in total value locked. So, anyways,
Yeah. And 34 million only on Ethereum, which is like surprising. I
crazy.
think, given the
It's
quality
crazy.
of
Yeah.
like good, like very solid core team. I think like especially Zeph is, and no disrespect to the other team members, like Zeph is very, very well respected in the dev community, has done a lot of good stuff. Mechanism design is incredibly solid. Website and design is very good. Like I think that this is good. This is like kind of why Aladdin DAO exists, right? To uncover the meaningful progress that's been made, with DeFi broadly. So
Hey guys, sorry. Anyone else have any other questions for Saneel?
Super interesting stuff.
thanks, Rodney.
Yeah, I have a question actually. So, Saneel, if we integrate this project, so exactly how you suggest that we should, what strategy we should take?
Yeah, so I think that probably have to spend a little bit more time thinking about which pools we'd want, but I imagine that it wouldn't be probably the best integration would be figuring out a sort of low risk pool. So kind of one of the blue chips, WBTC, WETH, USDC. Even though we might be sacrificing yield, I think it does give users kind of peace of mind in terms of risk management as far as the underlying token and mitigating actual like token volatility. Basically, market buy those tokens, then lock them up in kind of a somewhere between like a 3 to 9 month deposit, and then just basically use that. We'll get a fixed rate on that, but also use that to harvest harvest the MPH rewards and send that to keep that for Aladdin DAO. And I think that's probably the smartest action. Basically, take advantage, right? I think that there's like a lot of different pools that on 80 MPH that we can open a position and farm with. We can also have the option of buying yield tokens and trying to get leverage on other people's positions. But I think what makes most sense, what's most de-risked is trying to do that with something like stables, right? So, if we did even like, let's say just say 100,000 USDC, that's in 4 months that makes you $5,000 at current MPH rewards and fixed yields, right? Which is not insignificant. That's actually very good. So
Yeah. So basically what's going to happen, right, if we come to agreement for the new Boule incentive structure is we do need Boule members to make it very specific what strategies we're going to integrate. And with the new token economics, actually we can like cover a wide range. We can actually just fund the DeFi token directly if we think it's a solid project with great upside potentials, or we can just fund the farming yields through, the vault. And if we come down to the vault level, and we need the pool member actually to, specify which vault we should fund, right?
Yeah.
Or we can, just, recommend some really complex strategies, and that will be implemented actually at the back end, right? Because, it does add a lot of complexity to the development process, and probably not very practical for most, average users. And so when we send out, the announcement of how this, big voting process work, we actually need pool members, right? For every project, have been recommended, right? We need, to be very specific on what's the strategy to be integrated, right? Because in the new incentive, basically we're going to track a virtual portfolio for every pool member. For everything you recommend, you vote for, right? We're going to build this virtual portfolio and the virtual balance and the P&L statement for your portfolio, right? And the AID rewards going to be allocated based on the P&L position for each pool member's virtual portfolio.
Yep. I mean, that sounds good. I think that, yeah, in this case, like it would be some time to kind of figure out what model makes sense in terms of integrating with the Latin DAO, but just because the tricky thing that comes up here is that, when you open deposits, you want to open that up ideally with some large amount, so you can kind of maximize it. Although I will say that the other really nice under discussed thing about MPH compared to other protocols is that you can add on additional capital to your deposits anytime at the same rate. So it might be tenable in that case to create a vault strategy. It's just that you won't get the same kind of yield as if you deposited a full vault amount. But you can always add on liquidity to existing positions. So potentially a vault strategy works well here.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I think this is such a great presentation. I really love it. Very comprehensive overview of the landscape in fixed rate space.
Awesome. Yeah.
So do we have any further questions for Saneel? Okay, so we ran the meeting for 45 minutes today. Yeah, thank you everybody for making the meeting today. And just Happy New Year to everyone. And thank you for everything you have done to Aladdin DAO this year. We can't make it here without your support. And wish everybody have a great year ahead in 2022. And
Thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Happy holidays.
Thanks,
Hey,
guys.
happy holidays,
Saneel.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sharlyn. Thanks, Saneel.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Saneel. Yep. So we'll see everybody in the new year.
See you guys.
All right. See you. Okay.
See you. Bye.